the only connection that the Osiris myth has to the Bible story is just the idea of the resurrection, big picture. Osiris was resurrected, Jesus was resurrected, and people can easily refute that by simply just saying, well, but there's a lot of resurrection myths throughout history in various religions, and then they just end it right there. But I think I'm going to show to you today that there's a lot more to this story that people don't tell you when they just say, well, that Osiris was resurrected. And is that story shown in the Bible? And I think I'm going to be able to explain to you. If you stick with me, it'll be a slow start because we have to get an underlying foundation of knowledge to be able to understand the full mystery, if you will. And if you don't understand, mystery is what Paul talked about when he was saying over and over again throughout the New Testament that the mystery of Jesus Christ. Well, you didn't understand this in the Old Testament, but the mystery is that you're going to understand this through progressive revelation, because he was speaking to mostly people that were schooled in Greek Hellenistic understanding of mystery school knowledge. That's how Mithras was throughout the Roman Empire. It comes from this Greek and ultimately Egyptian understanding of progressive revelation or Gnosticism, and Paul was talking to that. By the way, Paul himself, his name used to be the Hebrew Saul, then it became Paul, which is short for Apollos, which is a Roman name or a Roman god, god of the sun, and you're going to find out that there's a lot of connections between Jesus and the sun, S-U-N, as it's spelled out very specifically multiple times in the Bible. Jesus is both the sun and the moon. So let's just hop right into this. The numbers behind me on my board here are what's known as sacred numbers. It's not a comprehensive list of all sacred numbers, but all of these numbers you will find in some way or another. And I think this is backwards when you see this. Let's see if I can. I just realized. Let me see if I can turn the screen around, because this will be a bummer. I know I can. I should have thought about this before, but I haven't done this in so long. Let's see, settings. I think I can change. I have to look through my bifocals to see the screen here. Let's see, there's a way I can turn this screen around, and I feel bad I didn't do this at the beginning, but it just dawned on me. Let's see, video. Mirror camera, here we go. There you go. Now you should be able to see the numbers better. Okay. Now did that just, yeah. Okay. Now you can see them better. All right. So now you'll be able to see these numbers by looking at your screen, and I'll have to turn them around backwards, make this whole thing a lot easier. So these numbers are what's known as esoteric or sacred numbers, and it's not a comprehensive list, but in mystery schools and in Pythagorean geometry, they often multiply in interesting ways, or they add up in interesting ways, and this just mesmerized the people of the mystery schools, because remember, mystery schools, kind of like masonry, if you will, is about building things. So you see the sacred geometry in buildings and structures down through history, whether it be medieval churches and cathedrals and so on, all the way back to the pyramids and the Temple of the Sun in Mexico and so on. I mean, all over the world. You see these sacred numbers. There's even a religion called Jainism, Jain-ism, that worships the number that you see up there, 108. I wouldn't say worship's the right word, but they really, really are fond of that number. And there's a good reason for that. So mathematics and math, by the way, the word myth is built on the word math, and that's a very important thing to understand. Myth and math are inseparable as concepts. Myth, math, master, which combines two things. Think about this word. Okay, so you got myth, and you have math, mystery. These are all the same roots, okay? Math. And then you have the word master, which is this root combined with the word aster, which means star. So a master is literally the myth of the stars, which is where you get the word astrology, or the concept rather of astrology from, is combining the myth with the stars. And that is very prevalent in Egyptian mythology. It's very present in the Bible. I've actually seen a Masonic Bible before. And when you look to the back of the Masonic Bible, they give members a Bible, or maybe you had to pay for them. I don't know. I'm not in Freemasonry, but if you look in the back of it, it says to interpret the Bible through the Egyptian mystery. So clearly they understand what's going on here. And we're going to do some of that today as well, through looking at some of the things that have happened in the Bible that show you these numbers. All these numbers in some way or another are either directly mentioned in the Bible or are concepts that are encoded in the Bible in various ways. And just 27, you say, what's that? Well, how many books are in the New Testament? 27, 33, how old was Jesus? Either 30 or 33, depending on how you interpret one of those verses. So, when he died. Then we'll get into these very, very shortly. So you got myth, math, mystery, master. But now think about this. You have mother, matrix, which means womb in the Old Testament, is math. Oh, wow. Boy, these words really go together, don't they? Yeah, they go together very, very well. So the oftentimes you'll see that the cosmic egg, or the womb of the universe, is the mother in the matrix. Matrix is literally the word for womb. And you see the Matrix movies, and the Matrix movies is telling you about another world. You get the concept, and you get there through. It's no coincidence that in the movie The Matrix, the guy who first led the 7 people into the Matrix, his name was Cipher, because you use a cipher to interpret the numbers. So some people will say, well, you shouldn't use numbers to understand the Bible. And I say that is complete and total hogwash. I didn't put the numbers there. These numbers were put there thousands of years ago. And then in the King James, they even translated it into English using their own code of numbers to try to give you to pass down a lot of this mystery knowledge and include as many of these numbers as possible through their own cipher. And these things become very evident. You could look back to see some of those ciphers, or I've drawn them out in previous videos. So I haven't made one of these videos in a while, but I do have a specific playlist just for these sort of videos. So just look for that playlist, and you will quickly be able to go back and see those ciphers drawn here on this board, so you have a greater understanding. So we see how these words are connected. So first, now I'm going to have to tell you the story of Osiris if you haven't heard it. So I'm going to draw the names because I realize, this may be the first time you've ever heard this. The names are old. They sound kind of funny. And, not everybody's heard these stories. So if you're steeped in this myth, just bear with me, okay? But not everybody has been. So you've got Osiris is the guy, the husband. Isis is the wife. And then there was a guy named Set. All right. So these are some of the gods, I guess, if you will, of ancient Egypt, as the story goes. And Set did not like Isis and Osiris. Okay, so husband, wife, and Set. I don't know if he was related or not. Doesn't matter. All right. Set did not like Isis and Osiris. He was angry, so he cut up Osiris into 14 pieces. So here we are already. Set cut Osiris into 14 pieces. All right. And he threw those pieces into the Nile River. Isis went searching for the 14 pieces of Osiris. And she found 13 of those pieces. Is 13 also another number in the Bible? There was the 13th disciple is the unlucky number. Isn't that interesting? So she found 13 of the 14 pieces. All right. Now, you'll see right there, if you just take this one off, and I didn't write it directly up here, but 314, I had the pi symbol here a minute ago and I erased it. But 314 is also one of the numbers. I'll just write it up here. Yeah, still fits. Okay, so 314 is pi. I had pi and phi up there as symbols, but I didn't write out the numbers. So 314, you can see right here. Now that's very interesting. She found 13 of the 14 pieces, but she was missing one piece. Notice I took off the 1 to get to pi. You see that? Okay. That's very, very, very relevant. Now, she couldn't find the piece, and that piece just happened to be his phallus. But Isis went instead, and she found Osiris's or not found, she built Osiris's phallus out of gold. Okay? So she created a golden phallus for Osiris, brought Osiris back to life. Okay, there's the resurrection myth. You might have heard that part from other people debating and stuff about this. Is all this in the Bible? And that's as far as they usually go. So she brought back Osiris. Well, Osiris then reproduced with Isis, and they produced. Now I just lost track of his name. The hawk god, Horus. There we go. Horus. Now you will see, because she did that, she was able to pass on her genes and her lineage on, because he now had an ability to reproduce with his golden phallus. So they produced Horus. Now Seth then was cut off at the horizon, isn't it? So the sun now sets at the Horus eyes end. Do you see how that works? And don't forget about this 314 and 1 is gone. Now, do we find this anywhere in the Bible? Let's see for a second. Remember this name Set and the 314. All right. Now, don't forget these things. They're important. If you forget, you'll have to go back and rewind and refresh your memory. Now, Adam and Eve, who numerically speaking, their names are basically odd and even, if you will. And that's not a coincidence, okay? Odd and even had 3 children, and they are Cain, Abel, and look at this name, Seth. Boy, does that look familiar? Set and Seth. Okay, so now you have look at the number of letters that we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so we have 12 letters. There's 4 each. Like, you had 12 disciples, right? Well, look at this. So you have 3 groups with 4 letters in each name. What's missing? Oh, the 1's missing. And you know why it's missing? Because if you read the story, Cain killed Abel, just like Set killed Osiris. So it's a repeat in mystery form of the exact same story. Now, is that the only place we see this in the Bible? No, it's not. You see in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 23, look at this number right here. 223 is often the number attributed to skull and bones. I didn't look in the chat just to see if anybody might be chatting or anything here. Nope. Okay. So 223, 2 Kings 2:23, we have the story of the prophet Elisha, who was a student of Elijah. Elijah had gone up in a whirlwind, right, and left Elisha. Now, Elijah had done 7 miracles in his lifetime. And you could probably add one more number right here, because we've already mentioned it a few times. 7, a multiple there with 14. And Elisha, who asked for a double measure of the spirit of Elijah, got it and did 14 miracles. Okay, so 7 and 14. Right here in 2 Kings 2:23, we find that there were some kids making fun of Elisha. Not something you want to do for a prophet. So God, in revenge, called down 42, or I'm sorry, there were 42 children. There were 42 children, and God called down 2 she bears. And the feminine part of this is I'm sure has a meaning, but there's 2 she bears. Okay. Now, if you look in the sky, what are the 2 bear constellations called? Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, which are built primarily of 7 stars each. 7 plus 7 is 14. We refer to those also as the Little Dipper and the Big Dipper. One of those points towards the North Pole. I can't remember if it's the little one or the Big Dipper. But anyway, and you know, the Bible says that heaven is in the parts of the north and so forth. So their stars are aligned correctly. So the children come and the bears come and eat the 42 children who were making fun of Elisha. Now, why? What were those kids saying to Elisha that made him so mad that God had to call down the she bears to devour the 42 children? Well, they were saying, you bald head. Now, that's generally not a thing that people get too worked up about, right? But it just so happens that the Egyptian word for bald, which might look a little interesting, is ISOIAS. And this is well known in the Egyptian mysteries as the prophets of Isis were bald. Okay, so I don't know if it really looks like Elijah. It looks a little bit more like Isaiah, perhaps, than it does Elisha. But anyway, they were saying you're one of the prophets, okay, of Isis, like we talked about. Now he was bald, and so no, you can't call the prophet of God a prophet of Isis, right? But really, what's going on here is this is a revitalization of the same story. So when there's even a part where someone touched the bones of Elijah and was resurrected, a dead person. So you still even have a resurrection element built into the story as well. Now, so that is not coincidentally in 2 Kings, okay, 2:23 right there. You can look that up. 2 Kings 2:23. So that's the second place where we see the Osiris myth echoed in the Bible very clearly. Now here is another one. Remember everything we just said about Ma'at, myth, mystery, and math all being connected etymologically. They're the same words, okay? Now, then you go into the New Testament, and you find very interestingly that the first book of the New Testament is not the first book written in the New Testament. Okay. It is, in fact, Mark was probably the first gospel written, which is why it's so much smaller. And then other parts of the story were added to it. And then you get Matthew and Luke and John. Well, they put Matthew, and I want you to think about that word after everything we just said. Mayat. Matthew. And what is the very first 4 letters of that? Matthew. Okay. Now, part of the Osiris myth, okay, is that you had to pass 42 principles of Ma'at, who is a feminine god, hence the she-bears, the 2 she-bears. That was the part I was forgetting about Elisha's she-bears. So she was a feminine god, hence mother and matrix and all those words that we just talked about. And if you pass the 42 principles of Ma'at while you're alive, and if your heart was lighter than a feather, on Judgment Day they would weigh your deeds on a scale against a feather. And if your heart was lighter than the feather, because you obeyed the 42 principles of Ma'at, you got to go to the Sea of Reeds and live happily ever after. And if you failed, then you were eaten by a crocodile. That's how the myth goes. You know, I didn't make it up. So, but that's how the myth goes. So you had the 42 principles. Now look at this 42 and how we talked about the 13, 14, and the 3, 1, 4. And now let's go into Matthew right now. And let's read Matthew chapter 1, verse 17. Okay. It starts right in the New Testament with the chapter of Matthew, and it says, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David unto the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations, and from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. Now here's something that I want you to do. Go home and look up Matthew chapter 1, and I want you to count how many names are listed. Remember, it said 14, 14, and 14. Well, 14 times 3, there's our pi number again, equals 42. So now you see how all these numbers are connected, okay? And that's not a coincidence. Pi is built into the pyramids. It's built into so many structures worldwide. And it's not a coincidence that the temple was destroyed in 722 BC. And why is that? Why is that number interesting? Because 22 divided by 7 is pi, 314, okay? So that's also part of how history is created artificially, okay? So we created a math system with history to go with the math, and even engineered history to echo the mythology, if you will. This is just how the world is engineered, and a lot of people don't understand this. So anyway, so you got 42 generations of Christ, but one is missing. Does that sound interesting? Well, why is one missing? Because it's echoing the Osiris story. You see, that part of Matthew where the genealogy was put in was added after Mark. You'll notice Mark doesn't have that genealogy. Someone added that, made it the beginning of the New Testament, and made it the Matthew, and called it Math and Matthew and Matthew, to echo the Osiris story. And what they thought they were doing is they were adding legitimacy to Christ and to his genealogical structure. When in fact, if you even go out, a lot of Jewish rabbis realized that the list of those 41 actual names that are listed there is not even an inclusive list of everyone that should have been in the genealogy of Christ up to that time. So the person who wrote it was doing this specifically to add Gnostic sort of genealogical understanding and, in their mind, authenticity to the heritage of Christ, okay, to make him like the Egyptian gods. And that is not coincidence by any stretch of the imagination. Now, it's interesting that in the Egyptian mysteries, okay, you had Ra, the sun god, right? Ra was the sun god in Egypt. You have, it's been noted by many people, that is Ra, El. El is Elohim, or the council of Ra, the sun god, okay? And you say, well, is there any more mention in the Bible about the sun god? Well, I'll point you to the very last book of the Old Testament. Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. And now I want you to look at the number, or the chapter and verse number, and see if you've seen that number anywhere on our board, and have we talked about that. Malachi chapter 4, verse 2, where it says the sun, capital S-U-N, not S-O-N, S-U-N of righteousness shall come with healing in his wings. And the New Testament predicts that that will be the Messiah. And then, immediately in Matthew, it immediately gives you 42 generations of Christ minus the one to echo the mysteries of Osiris. Not a coincidence by any stretch. Now, is there another place where Jesus is called the Son? Do you know in the New Testament, Jesus is quite literally called the Son? You can't get around this. You can't say I made this up. The prophet said it in the Old Testament, but in Revelation, all right, you have Revelation. Let's see, did I write it down? Oh, yeah, yes, I did. Revelation 21, 23. Now, if we take the 1 out again, minus the 1, isn't that interesting? We keep taking that 1 away. What do you have? Revelation 2:23. Jesus is literally called the sun and the moon in the New Jerusalem. Now, the New Jerusalem, if you don't know, is a big cube, okay, that is 12,000 furlongs by 12,000 furlongs. A furlong is 660 feet, by the way, and you can do the math on that, and you'll find all kinds of interesting things when you start doing the math of the very cubical New Jerusalem that descends from heaven. But Jesus is called the sun and the moon of the New Jerusalem. Now, in our King James Bible, we have the word Jesus, okay, right? Yet in Hebrew, you have him as Yeshua. Now, you might notice that this and this don't seem to go together. How do you have a vowel turned into a consonant ending, right? In English. Now, if you transliterate it, you have Joshua. Why did it become Jesus? Isn't that weird? And the reason is because the name of Jesus in Greek, and as it was made in the King James Bible, was intentionally imbued with mystery numerology that connects to this New Jerusalem cubical temple where Jesus is called the sun and the moon. Now, you may say, well, I'm making all this up. Well, I'm going to prove this beyond any shadow of a doubt, because think about also, you got the name Solomon, which in Hebrew comes from shalom. Now, notice the M starts there. What's this? Where'd we get that from? What's the O in? You see, because when we changed it to English, what we did was we made shalom into sol, the sun, and mon, the moon. So the builder of the first temple was the sun and the moon, echoing Jesus being both the sun and the moon of Revelation 2:23, right there in the old temple. Do you see how clear this is? Now, this was done on purpose by the people who translated the Bible. His name should be something closer to shalom. That's what it is in Hebrew. But in English, we made it the sun and the moon to echo the New Jerusalem cubical temple that descends and becomes the New Jerusalem where everybody lives on the new earth, and everybody gets to go up to the New Jerusalem, supposedly, depending on whose theology you're testing here and believing. So now we're going to get into, the sun and the moon. So Jesus is called multiple times the sun and the moon. And you even read in Matthew, you read, okay, he goes, let all the little children come unto me, for such is the kingdom of God. Okay, well, all the little children can come, right? But then he goes on and he says, but to you 12, it shall be given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. And again, like I said before, the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven are how knowledge was passed on in secret mystery schools. We have echoes of these today, like the Freemasons and secret fraternities, where you pass on mystery knowledge by degrees. Okay. And this is why Paul, whose name was the Hebrew Saul, began working for Rome and changed his name to Paul, which is short for Apollos, or the sun god of Mithras. Again, Mithras was the major religion of the Roman Empire. And we see what? Oh, there's myth. There's math. Okay. Yeah, myth, math, master, mystery. Okay. You see how Mithras was even the belief of Constantine by 325, when he needed to add he needed to add as many Christians into his army as he possibly could. So he was fighting at the, what was it called, Melvian Bridge outside of Rome, and he realized that a lot of the opposing army had a lot of Christians in their army, even his generals and so on. And here his old religion was sort of opposed in Mithras to that Christianity, so he needed to get those Christian generals on his side. And so that's where the in hoc vinces and this sign conquer sign came from. And he made that story up in order to get Christians on his side. And he won that battle, and he won over the generals, and he began to incorporate Mithras, something by degrees that you pass on by degrees, like Jesus said, and put that into the New Testament as well. Now, am I just pulling all this up out of my rear end, or is there more? Oh gosh, there's so much more that will help you to understand whether Constantine himself did this. I don't think so, because I realized that Irenaeus, who lived 150 years before Constantine, was already using a system like this. But I think Constantine and other believers in the mysteries and mystery religion and fraternal organization types, in Mithras you had 5 degrees. You gained this by steps and by knowledge. You added the math with it. So I think that it was already in the works, and Constantine adopted it. Irenaeus was already using this system I'm about to show you to try to understand who was the Antichrist as far back as 150 AD. Okay, so you're talking 170 years or so before Constantine did this. It was already being used in the Roman Empire. What am I talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is this. You have kurios. So I'm going to give you some Greek here. Kurios, Jesus, Christos. And this is in Greek, Lord Jesus Christ. Now, in previous videos, and I'm not going to do this today, okay? Go back to my previous videos. You can see the value of the Greek letters, because before around 400 or so AD, letters were numbers. They didn't have numbers like 2, 2, 7. No. Each letter had a value. Okay. S was 6 and blah, 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 So you can go back and see how they valued their numbers. All right. It's basically 1 through 10. Then you have teens and then hundreds. And then you add those together. Now, people like me, we took Roman numerals in school back in 7th grade. So, you got Super Bowl X, V, or what is it, LV 333. Is that right? What is it? We're 58, right? So L is 50 and V is 5. So 50 plus 5, and then I. So it's Super Bowl 58, right? Well, that's how the Romans did their numbers, because they didn't have this. They had letters, and the letters were their numbers. Well, the Greeks were doing that before the Romans, as every other civilization around the world had always done. Okay. Now, it's a little history that a lot of people just don't seem to know nowadays, but that's how the world worked. So the value of Lord Jesus Christ, which you could see the value of those numbers in previous videos, I'll just give you the totals here. 800, 888, and 1420, I think it is. Yeah. And if you add them together, let me make sure here, because I'm just going to make sure I got that last one right, because let's see. So I'm going to go, I want to make sure that the total is 3168 minus 800 minus 888. 1480. Okay, that's what I thought. I thought something was wrong here. So it's 1480. Okay, so you add them all together, and the total is 3168. This number is so remarkable, and I can just picture the mystery school people as they were passing this progressive mathematical knowledge on to their students and saying, wow, look at how amazing this number is and what all it means. So we got to pass this on to future generations. And the emperor wants us to make Jesus part of this. So let's incorporate our knowledge of this mystery information into his name and pass it on. And so thousands of years from now, it doesn't matter if you have a King James Bible or an NIV, you can go back to the Greek and you're still going to be able to come up with the value of his name. You say, well, what is so remarkable about this number? There are a lot of things, okay? Let's start by telling you that it uh it actually symbolizes and is amazingly the size of the earth. Okay, so you got the earth, all right, and you take its diameter of the earth, which is I think 7920. I think, let me take it real quick and I'll double check. 3168 divided by 4, yeah, 7920. So then if you take the diameter and you put a box around the earth, good grief, 7920 times 4, and it's a multiple of this right here, 31,680. Isn't that amazing? Well, they knew the size of the earth because if you remember, Eratosthenes and I don't know, what was it, 500 and some BC had already measured the size of the earth. And that's just, he wasn't the first to do that, folks. He was just the first that we have recorded. The size of the pyramids shows you the size of the earth because actually, if you see the Great Pyramid in Egypt, it would fit right here, okay? Actually, like this, right? So it would, the Great Pyramid is actually a perfect symbol of the full size of the earth. Okay, so this knowledge is way older than the Greeks, but Eratosthenes, from whose name I suspect we got the word earth, measured the size of the earth, and this was the sacred number that they came up with, 3168, a multiple of it times 10. So they incorporated that amazing number into the name Lord Jesus Christ for future generations to pass on. I hope I'm not losing you, but that number is still, there's some really amazing things out there. And you see, we had that number on the board here. Okay. Now, what else about that number can we say? 3 times 1 times 6 times 8 equals 144. Oh, is that number up here? Yes, it is. That's one of our sacred numbers that are on our board here. And possibly you've read that somewhere in the Bible, probably in Revelations, where you read about in chapter 14 the 144,000 people that were saved. Where did that number come from? Why did John just pick what you thought was a random number? I mean, you could say it's the 12 disciples times 12. That's 144. But where'd you get the other 12 from? I don't know. You could say the Old Testament 12 tribes of Israel, because you had the gates of New Jerusalem. So that would be fair. You could say that times the 12 disciples, right? That's 144. So you have just the numbers multiplied of Lord Jesus Christ tells you how many supposedly are saved during the Great Tribulation, right? Wow, that's where he got the number from, okay? And if we know anything about John, I don't know if John actually wrote the Bible, but maybe he did. It seems that John may have been one of the people that was practicing writing with the Essenes out of the dead, who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls and so forth, because there's a lot of this stuff in those scrolls too. And they may have been one of the groups that were passing on this knowledge. So it does seem that John especially, you got John who talks about the 153 fish. You say, why did John talk about 153 fish? That's one of our, if I didn't write it up there, I should have. I didn't. But 153 is another one of our numbers that goes up there. And that's another sacred number that we'll talk about here as we continue. Okay. So John was full of this knowledge, and John wrote Revelation, and here you go with more of the same numbers. Was it actually a guy named John? I don't know. Maybe it was. But he definitely was adding a lot more than Mark did in his very condensed gospel. Okay. And then you had Matthew that added so much more of the mystery religion. And then John had just blew it out of the water with the Gnostic numbers and so forth with John and the book of Revelation. Then you had Paul try to pull all that in, and then you realize in Paul's writings, they don't have any of that. All of Paul's writings is just, hey, I'm here as a symbol of Rome. Make sure in Romans 13 you obey the Roman empire because obeying the empire is good, and that's what God wants you to do. And stick with just baptism and the resurrection of Jesus, and forget all this mystery stuff. And he even says, hey, if you have all the knowledge of the mysteries, but you don't have love, then the knowledge of the mysteries will do you nothing, right? What is that? First Corinthians, right? And is it 13, the chapter on love, the love chapter? So if you don't have charity, it doesn't matter if you can interpret the mysteries, Paul said. But his name literally means the sun, Apollos, the sun god, okay? And he was working for Rome. All right. So you see, now this is the Greek part of that number. So now let's see if there's anything more to this 3168. To do so, let's take 3168 times pi. All right. Now this equals 1008, which is very, very similar to our 108 up here. I don't need to draw a line. I think you can see that. And 108, which I told you when we started this video, is a number that is not worship, but is very much respected by at least one religion in the world called Jainism, Jainism. They build statues all the time that are 108 feet tall. Okay, they just completed a massive 108 foot tall statue that was in the news about 5 or 6 years ago. Worshippers of the Jain religion, I believe they're in India. So 1008. What is so interesting about the 108? Okay. We were talking about the sun. We were talking about the moon. Well, here's the moon. We're talking about the earth rather than the sun. Well, the moon has a diameter of 2,160 miles, which means its radius is 1,080 miles. So that 108 is a number that is half of the moon. Okay, so you have Solomon in the Old Testament representing the sun and the moon, who built the first temple. Jesus in the New Jerusalem, who is literally called in Revelation 2:23 the sun and the moon. Okay, I mean you can't make this stuff up. I mean they have this down very, very good, and they chose the perfect number and the perfect spelling of Kyrios Jesus Christos to equal this number, so that when you multiply it out, you get variations of this number. And to them, this just fascinated them. I just know it did. Now I'm going to show you another little mystery here, and this is just cool. Okay, this is just fascinating, and this is the 1881 that I have up here. Okay. Now, 1881, let's go here. 1881 is a pretty amazing number, because if you take the number 18 and you add, this is called a triangular number, okay? You add 19 and you add 20 and you add 21 and you keep on going all the way till you get to 81, okay? And your last number will be 81, and you add them all up. It'll equal 3168. Now I could just see these people in Mithras and sitting around in some, dark cave, just going, "Wow." I can see some of the Platonic Mystery School people, probably 500-600 years before that, just going, "Wow, look at these numbers! How they do this? This is pretty fascinating." And it literally measures the size of the earth. What are the chances? And then you see some interesting things when you put these numbers together. Let me show you, for example. You take 1881 and you go 1 times 8 times 8 times 1. So there's just these numbers multiplied together. Okay. And you take the numbers of this and keep going, times 3 times 1 times 6 times 8. So just keep on going. And it goes to 9216. Oh, there's our 216, which was what? The diameter of the moon, okay, with an extra number added to it. But then break it on down some more. 9 times 2 times 1 times 6, and that is 108. So there you have, again, the radius of the moon. Isn't that amazing? And I could just see all these people just going, "Wow." Now you can add them. Look what happens when you add the numbers. take all these multiplication numbers out and just pretend like I put add signs in there so I don't have to redraw it all, okay? So you add them, plus, 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 plus. I was multiplying before. Okay, I did put an add sign there. Or no, hold on. Okay, I'm getting confused here. Okay, now let's just take these numbers and do add. Just add all the numbers, right? Well, 1881, if you add that, that's 16, 17, that's 18, right? You add these numbers, that's 18. All right, which kind of already looks like 1881 a little bit. Add the 18 plus the 18. That equals 36, and 36 is the triangular number of 666. Now, have you ever seen that number in the Bible anywhere? I know I start seeing people leave because you're like, some people are like, oh no, numbers. But if you're going to read the Bible, you have to know this stuff if you want to have any clue what it means. Okay. So you say, oh, 666, that's in the New Testament back in Revelation, but it's also connected to Solomon. Because you read in back here in 2 Kings, Solomon had his 666 talents of silver delivered that he put into the temple. So 666 is right there. And it's also this number. If you'd add 432 in its reverse, what do you get? Oh, 4 plus 2 is 6, 3 plus 3 is 6, 4 plus 2 is 6. And 432, if you add that together, where'd my... Now remember, we're only doing adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing. None of this is complicated math, okay? I mean, if you've made it through 3rd grade, you have all the skill sets needed to understand this stuff. So 432, let's look at the sun. The sun is 864,000 miles in diameter, okay? That's the whole diameter, so that means half of it is 432,000. So 432 is half of the sun, and do it to this opposite, and it becomes the 666, and that's why you have that number. You just thought it was a random number. Where'd they come up with this? Everybody, the most you'll ever hear in church is, oh, well, that's the number of man because man was made on day 6, and man is evil, so there's 666, so the devil wants the evil number. That's as far as they go. But they never put it in context. They never put it with the other numbers that are in Revelation, the 144 and so on that we've talked about here, and the 223 and so on. Now, you might even notice where 666 is mentioned is Revelation 13:18. Multiply those numbers, and it's 432. Now you see how they got that number? Revelation chapter 13, verse 18. Multiply 13 times 18 is 432. See, so you just can't make this stuff up. This is amazing. And I see some a comment. Smooth criminal. Your knowledge is incredible. Well, thank you. It's not really. It makes me feel inadequate. Don't, because you have the skills for this. And I literally just sit there with a literal calculator on my phone, as you can see right here. See? And you just add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So when you come up with numbers in the Bible, just add them up. It's easy. You'll be amazed. Now, let's get back to our 3168. All right. And our 1881. So if you take 3168, and this blows my mind, okay? 3168, and you divide it by 1881, which can be used to find 3168, like we showed you. And it equals 1.68, which is pretty close to phi, okay? I know it's 1.618, okay? But, I don't even think they went that far, that many numerals past the decimal point usually. 1.6, it is pretty darn close approximation of phi, the golden ratio. Wow. You see how this is why this number had to be the number of Lord Jesus Christ. You see, it had to be. Now, here's something interesting I'm going to tell you. Oh, I've got so many stories here to tell you. Okay, in the year, I'm going to hold this 1881 up here. I better leave that. Let's turn the word, or the number rather, 1881 into a year. And let's call it the year 1881, not long after the Civil War. And who was president? Garfield, right? The middle name was Abram Garfield. What was his first name? James, I think. Andrew Garfield. And I forget. But anyway, his middle name was Abram Garfield, and he was killed in the year 1881, 16 years after 16th president Abraham Lincoln. Notice Abram and Abraham, same variation, same word. 16th president was killed. Now you say that's just coincidence, that nobody was thinking about this. I want you to go back to my videos when this is done and look where I took you through the cemetery and showed you some very interesting names. I showed you their tombstones. I showed you their names right here in Marietta, Ohio, which is the first town of the Northwest Territory that is directly connected to the Revolution of America, because the people who founded it were people like Rufus Putnam, who's buried right next to the mound. And then go back and look at my mound video and look at the math of the mound, which incorporates all these numbers that we're talking about today into the mound itself, and realize that the people who killed President Garfield, and his name, it's coming to me. It's, I think I even wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, because it's Guiteau. Guiteau. Guiteau is buried just down from, not the same guy, but his family, from the Booth family that killed Abraham Lincoln. Guiteau is literally buried with Rufus Putnam in the same plot, the same little square that Rufus Putnam is buried in. The guy who founded Ohio and the Northwest Territory, who fought for George Washington and received George Washington's sword, that guy was buried with this guy who killed this guy, right down from this guy who buried this guy. Their families, not the actual individuals. Isn't that amazing? Their ancestors. This is not coincidence. People put this stuff together. I don't know why. They think it's cool. I don't know. They think that it'll echo through history better. It'll make some sort of message. I don't know what their reason is, but you can see their fingerprints along the way, and it's extremely obvious to those of us who look for it. Now, so I had another story. So the 47. Let's take the 3168, which is, remember, the value of Lord Jesus Christ put together. Add it up as 3168. And we take 3168 and divide it by 666. Okay? This equals 47. Now, I want to remind you that Rufus Putnam and Guiteau are buried right beside a mound that I measured myself, the moat around the mound, and I showed this in the video. You could see, not making this up. I measured the mounds correctly, and the circle around the mound is 666 feet around. It is 666 feet above sea level also. When you divide this, you have 47. Rufus Putnam, who was there in Washington, I kid you not, used to meet at the Bunch of Grapes Tavern in Boston with other Revolutionary War heroes, and even before the Revolution, when they battled the 47th Regiment of Foot from the British, the famous 47th Regiment of Foot, they actually worked beside in the French and Indian War when Americans were still British. And then during the Revolution, turned against the famous 47th Regiment of Foot, meeting there at the same Bunch of Grapes Tavern, and declared independence on the 4th of July, the 7th month. Then Rufus Putnam took 47 people with him to Marietta and founded Marietta on the reverse on April, the 4th month, 7th, the 7th day. You see this? And this is the museum people. They get mad at me when I point this stuff out. They don't like it when I tell reality like this. But that number 47 is very important. And he is buried right beside the mound with this guy who killed this guy, right down from this guy who killed this guy. or their families, their ancestors, not the actual person. Now, see, you can't make this stuff up. Oh, so what else can we do here with these amazing, amazing numbers? And again, I told you the 18 and the 18 equal together 36, which is the triangular of 666. Okay. And that mound is 36 feet high and 36 feet from the base of the mound to the moat, which is 666 feet around. And everybody should say, wow, now I'm going to show you the mound again. Let's just go ahead and do a little bit of that mound math because this is just so much fun to me. Again, this is nothing but add, subtract, multiply, and divide. All right, so here's the mound. Make it an overhead view. So we're looking at it from the sky, looking down at the mound. And it's got this moat around it, okay? And the moat's about 4 feet wide. So we're looking down at a little ditch. There's no water in the moat, but people call it a moat, okay? And this is, just you can walk across this. It's not very deep or anything. And Rufus Putnam and Gito are buried right here, right beside it. Okay, it's not a coincidence. And what we see here is this is 36 feet. All right. And this thing is 36 feet tall. All right. And this is 666 feet around, all the way around it. And it's sitting at 666 feet above sea level. No possible way that's a coincidence. In 1881, if you add the numbers is 18, 3168 if you add the numbers is 18, add those together, there's your 36. The triangular of 666. What do I mean by the triangular of 36? So again, if you forgot what triangular numbers are, it's just 1 plus 2 plus 3, all the way until you get to 36. 36 being the last number. Add them all up and it'll equal 666, okay? If you're wondering what I'm talking about there. Oh, shoot. Let's see what else I got here. Let's go back to the Egyptian mysteries for a minute. Is this stuff in the Bible? Yes, it is. And Jesus echoed it so many times. The stories of Jesus in the Bible, in the Gospels, in Revelation, but not in any of Paul's works. Paul was working for Rome. I'm convinced of that. That's why he changed his name to the sun god, Apollos, okay? So he could bring people in for Rome. He didn't mind the mysteries as long as it was combined with appropriately enough with Mithras that you couldn't separate them very well. So he wanted to kind of downplay it a little bit for Rome so that you'd be obedient to Rome. Now, let's talk about in ancient Egypt. There was a place called the Hermopolis. H-E-R. Hermopolis. Where a police means city, but it is a temple where 8 gods were worshipped. Where do you see that number 8 up here? Kurios, Jesus, Christos, right? Jesus is 8. How many people got off Noah's Ark? 8. You had Noah, Mrs. Noah, their 3 sons, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and their wives. 8 people got on board and got off the ark. That's not a coincidence because 8 is the number of affinity, of continuity, the continuation of life. And in ancient Egypt, at the Hermopolis, at the Akhdode of Hermopolis, Agdod, 8 gods were worshipped. Now, does this sound anything? The Greek had the messenger god. And what was his name? Hermes. Same word, right? So if you want to get your message out, wouldn't it be interesting if Jesus went to anything like that? Oh, he did, didn't he? Jesus went to Mount Hermon. Which, not coincidentally, today is located 33 degrees north, 33 degrees east. Okay, exactly where that is located is Mount Hermon to this day. And that's where, if you read some non-biblical books like Elijah, that's where the angels came down and procreated with man to create the Nephilim giants, blah, 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 blah. That's all in Enoch and so on. Okay, so but you don't find that directly mentioned in the Bible, but you do in Enoch. So Hermon was that mountain where Jesus went. And instead of the angels coming down, he transfigured himself and he talked to two people. I think people have speculated who it was. Was it Elijah and Enoch, possibly? You know, Enoch would be interesting. Enoch died through, this story is mentioned in the book of Enoch. Plus, Enoch died at the year 365 years old, right? He didn't die, but he was translated to heaven without dying, rather. Okay, so Jesus transfigures himself, and Jesus calls 70 disciples to come and help him spread the message of the gospel. Okay, plus the two that he transfigured and saw from heaven. So that equals 70 plus 2 is 72, right? Now let's take 888 of Jesus and divide it by 72. And what do you get? 12. Oh, the 12 disciples were with them there too, weren't they? At Mount Hermon. So you have Jesus, the 70 plus the 2. That's why the Mount Transfiguration, they put these mysteries in the gospel for us to know and understand that they're echoing Hermeticism, if you will. Hermeticism is also what they call the mystical knowledge. Okay, it's called Hermeticism off of this. And Jesus was spreading Hermeticism, if you will, Hermetic knowledge in the Gospels by bringing down Enoch and Moses, or Enoch and Elijah, whoever they think it was. Okay. I think Enoch and Elijah makes the most sense considering everything we've talked about on here today, don't you? And you have the numbers of everybody that was there built into the math of the story. Absolutely amazing. And to just deny this and to just say, no, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. You can't. You can't do that, because 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. These letters will always exist in Greek. It's 2,000 years old. They're not going anywhere. Okay. You're not going to ever be able to deny this. They put it in the Bible in this way so that you would never, ever be able to get away from it. I don't care if you make an NIV or an ESV or whatever else, you're always going to be able to go back at some point to the old Greek, and you're going to be able to refigure this over again. And anybody can do it for themselves. You cannot get away from it. Now, here's another little interesting thing. All right, we're going to go back to that 108 there we were talking about earlier. Isn't this fascinating, folks? If you come in late, go back to the beginning later. There's just so much information here. You might think, hey, if you just stopped in the middle, hey, he's talking about some crazy stuff. But go back to the beginning and see how it all goes together, okay? I promise you, I explained it pretty darn good, I think. Okay. So let's take pi 314 and multiply it by 49. Now, what's 49? 49 I didn't write up here. 49 is an interesting number, okay? Jesus said to forgive them 70 times 7, which is what? A multiple of this, 490 times, right? 70 times 7. I missed a 7 there. So pi times 49, take the 0 back off, equals 153. Is this number anywhere in the Bible? That's John's 153 fish, folks. You remember when in John, which chapter is it? I'll tell you what, I always forget. I'll look it up real quick. John's 153 fish. So John's 153 fish. So you can find it later. It's in John 21:11. Okay. So go to the book of John, and you'll see that John, the disciples were out catching fish. Jesus told them to throw the net on the other side. I made a video where you can actually take the gematria of all the words in that chapter and literally draw a fish in a net, and the disciples and the Vesica Pisces and all this stuff. It actually gives you that in the gematria. There's another video I made for that. So go back and watch that another time. I'm not going to do that today. But there's John's 153 fish built into pi times the number of times you forgive. That's why there's 153 fish. That number they didn't just put that there for no reason. Now, here's another interesting thing about this number 153. And I actually found this in the mound in Marietta. Okay. This is what made me think of this. So there was my mound, right? And counting it from the edge of the moat all the way to the other side of the moat, I found it was 2,160 feet across, okay? Which is exactly the same as the moon. The moon's diameter is 2,160 miles across, right? So the mound in Marietta is a miniature moon. You can't make this stuff up. Now, in math, you take the radius of that, which is 108, and let's make it a right triangle. Man, if anything, these people from the mystery schools liked, it was right triangles, right? Pythagoras, was famous for the Pythagorean theorem, which, by the way, is called the 47th problem of Euclid. I stepped on that. Sorry about that, folks. So it's the 47th problem of Euclid, right? And we talked about 47 a little bit ago. And the 47th regiment of foot. And that's why on Washington's apron, Masonic apron, right there in the museum, where Rufus Putnam handed him a sword, is Washington's apron, Masonic apron, and it literally says the 47th problem of Euclid drawn on it, which is the Pythagorean theorem, right? Well, look at this. Look at the right triangle. If you have a right triangle of 108, let's make this a triangle right here, from here to here, and this is 108. And this is 108. The hypotenuse is, guess what? 153. So there, I'll draw it over here so you can, a little clear. A right triangle with two legs of 108 and 108 has a 153 hypotenuse. Wow. And you thought that number was just, they literally went out and counted the fish. That's what you thought. It's probably what they heard you. That's probably what they told you in church. They literally just went out and counted fish. Let's see. Smooth Criminal said, sorry, I did not keep it up on your comments there. You did come in during the middle of the video, but you'll go back. Oh, good. I hope you will. It's pretty interesting stuff. And I remember watching the video of the mound. Oh, good deal. Good deal. Some of this stuff just over the years, it all comes together in my mind, and I think about it. And then it's like, yeah, I just got to make a video about this. Because I hear every day, I sit there and in church, and I just hear people say the plain, literal interpretation, as if everything in the Bible was meant to be literal. And yet you see the mythology and the math and the Mithras incorporated time and time and time again, and they're all clueless, and they get mad if you try to tell them. But if they had the guts to watch a video like this, there's no denying what I'm saying, because you will always be able to go back to the Greek and pull those numbers and repeat the math over and over and over again. So there's no getting out of it. Oh, there was another one. It was, while I was talking, it was trying to go through my mind, another little story with some math in it, but I can't from the Bible. Maybe it'll come back to me. Maybe it won't. I don't know. And this is interesting here. Okay. The New Jerusalem. This isn't what I was about to say. You need to know how long a furlong is, okay? It's not a number that we use a whole lot, but the horse racers still use it. It really is a mathematical number that we still use. But one furlong, even at a horse track, equals 660 feet. Okay. In Rome, they used to use furlongs in their racetracks too. Okay, so it's been going on a long time. We still measure railroad tracks by how wide a horse's rear end is, or something like that, from the Roman Empire. So these numbers are pretty old. Okay, But this is still used in our system today. So it's almost 666, but not quite. But I think it was meant to be a derivative of it for some reason mathematically. Now I noticed that pi times, now this is just a close shot. It isn't perfect. This is just my own observation. It may not apply. It may or may not apply. You can judge for yourself, okay? Times 599. It's not too far away. Equals 1881. It's kind of far away, 61 feet away. So you might say, it's not connected. I don't know. But this is one of the things that I'll put on the shelf in my mind, right? And maybe 8 months from now, I'll see something that goes, 600 feet. Oh, okay. See, what I need to do is probably go back and measure the inside of the circle at the mound and see if it comes up to 600 feet. Maybe it does. I know the bottom of the mound is closer to 660 feet above sea level. And because the outside of the circle around the mound was 666 feet, I assumed that they were going by the elevation of 666, but they may have been measuring the center of the circle and the elevation from the bottom of the mound, you see, and it would have been exactly a furlong. But you see in the New Jerusalem, you see that the size of the cube of the New Jerusalem is 12,000 furlongs by 12,000 furlongs. So the New Jerusalem, where everybody lives forever and ever, in the city of New Jerusalem, that comes from the sky and descends down to the earth, which once you do all the measurements on that, that's good gosh, it's a picture of Metatron's cube here. Let's see if anything interesting. I think I measured this once before, and it's come up pretty interesting. But if I'm wrong, let's see. I'll just try something off the cuff here. 660 feet for a furlong times 12,000. There it is. That's exactly right. That's why. So 660 feet is a furlong, right? Multiply it by 12,000 furlongs, okay? And guess what it is? 660 times 12 is 7920. Who remembers what that number was? That's the diameter of the earth. If you multiply this number times 4, guess what it is? 3168. And that's the perimeter of the earth. You got the earth, remember? Diameter 7920. And you draw a box around it. 7920 times 4 equals 31,680. And you just thought they were just putting these numbers in there for no reason in the Bible. And your pastor doesn't know anything. And this tells you that whatever you've learned from the Bible, and it didn't include this, means that nobody in the last 2,000 years has taken it seriously. They've just been copying what the last guy said, and they just get further and further and further diluted. And so they get more and more and more denominations, and things just break apart. And you build BS on bigger BS, or smaller BS, you get bigger BS, and the next guy comes up with even more BS. And this is why you have so much idiocy preached in churches, because they don't know the first thing. They've never taught you any of this, did they? And a whole lot of this is just me sitting with a calculator taking the numbers of the Bible, but I didn't get it all myself, okay? There is a book. Let's see if I have it here. There is a book, and I think I've showed it to you before. It was sitting here. It is right here. The City of Revelation. Everybody on earth should read this book. City of Revelation by John Mitchell. It tells you about the 3168. Okay. I use this book in the videos. It shows you how to draw that net that I was talking about from John's 153 fish. It has pictures in here that strongly resemble the mound in Marietta. It's just, and he doesn't talk about the mound in Marietta. I just happen to live here, but the pictures that he wrote, this book's 60, 80 years old or something like that. And all this stuff is in there. And you'll see how these things go together. Now, here's another interesting thing you probably never knew that your pastor never told you, and I'll throw this in just for fun. And I know when you first hear this stuff, it's kind of depressing at first. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a big epiphany, and it's going to be away from everything I've ever been taught. I had to go through that. Maybe you are kind of feeling that way now, and I sympathize. But it's reality. Wouldn't you rather know reality than live in a matrix the rest of your life. I use that word matrix because it comes from mayat, remember, and mother, and all that, and math, and myth, and mystery. Wouldn't you actually want to know the real the real mystery behind it, instead of the be trapped in the matrix that they've built for you? You know, this stuff was meant to free you from that stuff that they've built around it. Oh, now, because I did too much talking, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, heavens. I've said so many. Oh, it's almost there. It's like it's kind of in the back of my head here. There's so many mysteries in the Bible. So many things that your pastor never tells you. Oh, I wish I could just learn to shut up long enough to think. And I would love it if somebody would come on here and just be like, "Yeah, I can prove that you're wrong." Great. Great. I hope you can. Prove to me I'm wrong. Go ahead and pull these numbers and you tell me how I'm wrong. You tell me how they didn't do this stuff. You tell me how everything I just showed you is a lie. I mean, you could go to Angkor Wat in Cambodia and you can see these numbers built into their temples thousands of years before Christ. Okay. You have, Christos right here, right? You go back in ancient Greece, and this was a good luck symbol. This is one of the first things that got me curious about this stuff, was seeing, I saw on churches, I saw this, and I didn't know what it meant. I even took Greek and I didn't recognize it. I took Greek in college. This is the Cairo, right? The first two letters of Christos, right? And do you know this was a good luck symbol that was over top of Greek houses and stuff? And you go out, you go see some of the Greek ruins, and you'll see this on old houses and temples and ruins and things. So this was part of, and look, Jesus' name is 888, right? I made a video a long time ago before I fully understood all this on what the number 8 meant. It was before I even fully understood it. And there's a restaurant in our mall, okay, here in Parkersburg. And I went down to the mall, and there is it's called a Chinese place called 88 something, 88 food or something. I forgot. But I went up, I said, "Do you guys have any idea what 88 means to you? Can you tell me, does that have any significance?" She goes, "Yeah, it means lucky." So 88 is like the good luck symbol over there in Asia, right? That makes sense. You had 8 people on the ark. Jesus's number is 888. And that's just part of how they built this number to resonate with people at the time and with the mystery schools and Mithras. Then you get down today and you've got people that are so far away from any of this understanding. They tell you have to tithe to the church, and I was captive by that. Can you imagine how much money? I mean, if I'd invested all that money I paid in tithe all those years, I might literally be a millionaire right now. You realize that? And don't get me wrong. If the money was literally going to charitable purposes to actually help people, then yeah, hey, I would have been all for it. I'd rather help somebody than be a millionaire any day. Okay. But I know these churches, and maybe a tiny bit of it's going to charity, but most of it's going for a lot of dysfunctional purposes, shall we say. Maybe you've noticed, right? Now, I'm no longer I've never been, I don't belong to those churches anymore. I go to a Baptist church occasionally with my wife and kids, and I understand that none of the people know all this. That's kind of what, when I started trying to bring some of this stuff up to people, that you could just tell they had no mind for it, no ability to, no desire even to look further into what was so obvious to me. And they just don't really care what the reality is, right? Well, so I really wanted some other organizations, and I looked at the Freemasons. Right down the road from me is a Freemason, and a place, a real big one up on the hill. When I first started learning this stuff, still very, very into what I believed, and I was saying, this is the devil. Look at the symbols, and look at how the ladies' meeting has the 5-pointed star and all this stuff, and the ladies' Freemasons use that 5-pointed star and all this, which I've made videos on that 5-pointed star that are pretty good. You should go back and look at those too. And I realized, wait a minute. When I talked to the Freemasons down there, they had no more mind for this stuff than the people at church did. So I'm like, you know, so I didn't want to join them, right? Um, so there are other ones though that are not geared to ever don't portray to ever know this stuff in the first place. And I'd encourage somebody to maybe to join one of those or something, but I don't think you should necessarily join something like Freemasons unless you talk to a few of them. And they say, "Yeah, we got the resources. We understand what you're talking about. Let's talk about some of this stuff." Then like the world's your oyster, man. You can really delve in and get some knowledge. Uh, but there's not very many places where you can learn this stuff, and people just don't seem to care about it. So their doctrines get more and more diluted. Then they make more doctrines from diluted doctrines, and they come up with some of the biggest bunch of hooey that you've ever heard. Like I said, the tithing, I mean, think about how many crazy denominations and so much. I mean, tithing is mainstream denominational stuff, right? But now you've got people that can't think on themselves and aren't interested in knowing the truth. So when something like uh, Scientology, per se, comes along, they can literally tell you about Xenu and about clearing your, the alien Xenu coming down and making Thetans spirits that live inside of you and telling you for the last 4 trillion years that you have to go and clear all the engrams out of your mind. And you're so freaking far away from any ability or desire to even understand reality that you fall for it. And now there's something like 40,000 people that have fallen for that Scientology BS. And they pay millions of dollars, some of them, to go through the classes. Can you imagine that? And it's just mind blowing. But it's because we're diluted from the truth. If we would just focus on this kind of stuff, imagine what religion would look like. You could probably have a decent religion, and people could come in and they could get together and they could say, "Hey, let's talk about our ideas." And oh, by the way, instead of giving the pastor a bunch of money and all this stuff and building a great big old building, let's see if we could raise money for charity. Churches could be more like that, and everybody wouldn't have to agree on all this baloney doctrine that has come down through all the churches. You could make a real church where they get together and maybe they discuss some of this and have a little fun with it, and then say, "Hey, let's raise some money for charity. What do you say?" Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't the world be a better place if we did that? I think it really would. Maybe I'll start one. What do you say? Would anybody join it? Would anybody join the Church of Bow and Arrow? I don't want your money. Okay, don't give me any money. Keep your money and give it to charity. Okay, um, and we'll have some fun. Make the world a better place that way. Well, I think I've said enough, and you can see what fun this is. So much more fun than that dry. Good gosh, look at what the Catholic Church became for all these centuries. Dull liturgy and people just chanting and sprinkling scent into the air, and everybody thinking they're just so holy because they can kiss the king or the Pope's ring. And you know this is fun, and if somebody disagrees with you on it, so you know there's only so much you really can disagree on because the numbers point out so much. But if you say, okay, that last number I gave you, which was something I'm just kind of holding in my mind, and there's a reason I did that. If somebody wanted to disagree with that, okay, everybody's got an opinion, right? But instead, we fight about doctrine and all this stuff in our churches because that's the only way to God. And if you see what the Bible really said, what Jesus and John and those before Paul came along, this is what the Bible really was. This is what the Essenes and Matthew and all them were telling you about. And Jesus was definitely a very Gnostic-minded person. Or it's even possible that the story is built around Jesus, and it wasn't really him, that they created this. But I strongly suspect there was an actual person that they built this around initially, but I could be wrong about that. And see, that's another thing you could disagree with, but it wouldn't matter because you still have all of this as a unit that People don't need to really disagree about that big a deal. And if you do, who cares? Let's raise some money for charity and have some fun, right? Because it's just ancient math. And I think probably you could put in some decent values and be a good person and make a good religion that still has moral values and things like that, and doesn't sit around and argue and fight. I just heard about another church close by this week. Feuding and fighting is tearing them apart, and they're going to have to shut the doors. What are you going to argue about if this is your subject? You can just have fun with it. And if you disagree, it doesn't matter. And that's why the Bible says faith, 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 faith all the time. If you have to have faith in it. All right, well, that's because you're not supposed to take it literally. If you take it literally, you've kind of messed up the whole point of it. People aren't literally rising from the dead. People aren't literally doing these miracles. These are parts of that. Oh, that's another one. That I think it finally come back to me. Dionysus. This is something your pastor didn't tell you. It finally dawned on me. The story of Dionysus is Dionysus was the god of wine, and he used to turn water into wine. Does that sound like a familiar story to you? Jesus turned water into wine. That was his first miracle, right? In one of the Gospels. It's not his first miracle in Mark. His first miracle in Mark was an exorcism. And that's why you have the oldest frescoes in the Middle East of Jesus is Jesus holding a magic wand because he was considered a magician. And you have the story of the Magi coming to see Jesus, who were Zoroastrians that followed stars. Okay. Zoroastrians following stars. Think about that. What does that mean? That means it wasn't a literal star that, like you see a little glowing orb going and sitting over Bethlehem at the stable, and they followed and just looked for where that star was just sitting, 300 feet above the stable. No, they were looking for a planet inside a certain constellation. They said, oh, it's time for the Messiah. Here's another example. The Northern Cross, okay, which is also called Cygnus, the swan. Okay. You can say this stuff is definitely built in the stars. Okay, we've already talked about the Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, and the she bears and the 42 kids and all this. Well, the Cygnus, I don't remember how many stars are in it. Let's say it's six stars. I don't remember exactly how many's in it. You can look it up. Do you realize on Christmas Day that the Cygnus goes below the horizon? This is the horizon, looking out towards the horizon. This constellation dips below the horizon just a little bit, or on December 21st. Stays there about 3 days, just barely, okay? Then on December 25th, December 25th, the cross, the Northern Cross, Cygnus the Swan, begins coming back in above the horizon. Think about that for a second. I'll just let you ponder that one. Maybe tell it to your pastor. It'll probably drive him. You'll see how mad they get because, if you start thinking about these kinds of things, it throws all the BS away, doesn't it? And it just destroys. It'll cause a lot of sadness, a lot of epiphanies for people because we've built our lives around a baloney understanding. But this is reality. And I can't help reality. I didn't create reality. This doesn't mean that there's no God. In fact, the amazing idea that these numbers literally are built into the actual measurements of the cosmos strongly indicates that somebody did that. So I'm by no means an atheist. But his nature and the doctrine and all this stuff that you come up with based on this stuff is straight out of man's head. The mythology and the stories and the mysteries comes from astrology, which became myth, master, myth and aster, the stars. the Zoroastrians that came to see Jesus. Okay. Well, I'll leave you with that, guys. Bye.